and data training that feels like the real world. So before they get started, to help you understand this platform, on the right side of your screen, you see that there's a chat room and a Q&A. If you have questions specifically for the speakers, you can add them to the Q&A, and then we'll add them to the screen. And if you want to chat about anything else, you can add it in the chat. So before they take over, I have a poll for you guys on the screen. There we go, bam. There we are. So I'm curious, you want to improve your data expertise, which online course would you take? And you got a ton of options there. And Sourabh, let's rewind you to about, let's rewind your life about 15 years, 10 years. Which one of these courses would you take?
I think Intro to SQL.
Intro to SQL?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And just so you know, audience, you guys can vote on these. There we go.
I think Jake would say the same thing. Right, Jake?
Totally.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't think 10 years ago when I was still in high school, I would have picked applied machine learning. Didn't quite know what that was at the time. Perfect. So with no further ado, you guys, the stage is yours. And it looks like Analytics Engineering with DBT1, which is actually the course that I just took with CoRise. So you guys are right. I absolutely love that course. And the stage is yours, guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Parker. And I'll give this very quick bios. I am Jake Samuelson. I am a co-founder of CoRise. Before that, spent a lot of my career as a product manager and Wayfair, Coursera, and other companies. And super thrilled to be here. I'll kick it over to the better Jake Hannan.
Jake 2. Hey, everyone. I'm Jake Hannan, currently a senior analytics engineer at Sigma. Prior to this, I was managing a team of analytics engineers at GoPuff. And of course, I help with the CoRise Analytics Engineering with DBT course as sort of a co-instructor, which is led by Emily. We'll give some love to Emily. But yeah, I'm kicking it over to Sourabh.
Hi, I'm Sourabh. I've spent most of my career doing data stuff. So I started as an early data engineer, data something at Coursera, and kind of did everything that like data people can do. And then spent a bunch of years at Google Research, and now I work at CoRise with Jake on building awesome teaching experiences.
All right. Awesome. So you are here today, hopefully, to learn a few of these things. But what we wanted to do is talk through what we've learned. So humbly learned the hard way, many of these lessons, but how we teach sort of data and technical training online. It's not such an easy thing to do. And there's a lot of trial and error that goes in here, but wanted to impart hopefully some lessons that we've learned. And then also help you think about learning opportunities to pick up new skills, technical skills, data skills on your own. So when we started, I'll just jump right in. We had a few things that were sort of, I guess, railing against or anti-patterns. So the first is learning that can totally leave you hanging. So, maybe you take a course and there's buzzwords and says, machine learning has a potential to disrupt your business and make you a superhero in your career. But then you get back to your desk and you're thinking like, what the heck am I supposed to do? So we've, raise your hand if you've had that experience. The second is learning online can be incredibly lonely. So this is a picture of me learning Python. So the first time you're stuck, you post on an empty forum and no one responds to you and you get depressed and you move on to something easier. Maybe you switch your tab to Netflix. So this is a pattern, again, we felt ourselves and building learning experiences. The next pattern we've seen is, just putting documentation as a replacement for a real learning experience. So obviously documentation could be incredibly helpful, but a poor substitute for most people when you're starting out. And then the next one, I guess the final one we'll talk about is learning that's, kind of divorced from what you'd actually do on the job. So it's either outdated or too theoretical, or, not using modern tools. There's no storytelling to understand how these new concepts connect to what you can actually do when you get your hands on the keyboard and get back to work. So these are sort of the anti-patterns that we felt when we were starting out and teaching the course. So we were lucky enough to, I think Emily is here. Emily, I don't know. You don't have to unmute yourself, but Emily. Oh, hey, beautiful. So Emily was just on the main stage, so we've spared her in presenting today. But she created this amazing course that we're going to talk through as an example of data training. I first spoke to a friend of mine, Ian Macomber, who's rejected me twice in my career. At first, I tried to hire him, and he went to Drizzly. The second time, I asked him to teach a course. And the second time, he let me down gently. He said, I have a better answer than me to teach this course. It is Emily, and she works on my team. She is an absolute rock star, and she sure is. And she created this course, distilled her knowledge, learning DBT on her own, lessons learned the hard way, and packed it into 4 weeks. And we teach it 4 times a year, and just incredible commitment to really caring about each and every student that we've had in the course, Parker included. So thank you, Emily. And that's the example of this course that we're going to kind of walk through. Cool. Going to kick it over to Jake.
Yeah. So building off of that, I think in a lot of online courses, I remember going through, I think it was a Python course as well. You sort of have these like separated, nothing sort of comes together course sections. And so I find it very challenging often to understand why I'm doing some things. Like I think back to undergrad when I learned, I don't know, like what a derivative meant, but then I thought to myself, how do I actually apply this? So what Emily has done and put together and what we teach, we sort of created a real life e-commerce platform that we call Greenery. So what you're seeing on the screen is just a basic ERD that we work off of. So we have our orders table that we sync into Postgres, and then we have events that get landed for the website. And so we're kind of just trying to create this real world scenario that can help resonate a little bit better rather than these sort of like piecemeal, here's this table, why don't you figure out what this means or build a model off of it. So we try to create a foundation that we can continue to build off of. And if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about how we actually do that. So the way that we set this up, again, trying to build a framework and then build off of it each week thereafter. In week 1, we try to just talk about how do you go from 0 to DBT init, right? Like how do we actually create the project itself? And so we start off with saying, hey, if we want to create the foundation, the first thing to do is set up some staging models. In week 2, we pull from what we've already done in week 1 and continue to build out more transformational layers, continuing to build off of the foundation that we've built. As we get to week 3, we move on to things that are a little bit more technical in the realm of DBT. So we talk about macros, hooks, and operations, but all the while we've still been leveraging what we've already built. So it gets very easy to understand, like, okay, I've done this thing first. Now I see why we've done it that way and how to continue to expand off of it, which I think really resonates with folks. And we've seen a lot of success there. And then in week 4, I think week 4 is probably my favorite week. We cover some more technical things within DBT itself, like about the product funnel and snapshots. But the other thing that we talk about is just what resonated with you most in the class and how you can see yourself actually using your learnings to deploy this or bring it to your company. And again, just kind of building off of everything week after week, I think really makes a lot of sense instead of going from, one individual project to the next. So we've seen a lot of success there and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think one thing to add here is, Emily was designing this course, and we've been designing courses at CoRise. We start with the project first in terms of actually creating the course as well. So we don't make a laundry list of concepts and say, okay, which ones should we teach in week 1 and which ones in week 2. We say, hey, what do we want people to be able to do? Let's work backwards from that. So it all kind of builds in that way, and really the majority of learners' time is spent working hands-on keyboard, like on the project, which is, I think, a pattern that we've seen really work well.
Yeah, and then what happens towards the end of the course, we have a Slack community, and we get to see how people are feeling about the learnings that they've encountered. And this is a quote, just being super happy about the DAG that they've created. And again, it's all built off of what each week has a new layer added to it. And so it's really fun to see this kind of journey for people as they get to learn. And there's always this light bulb moment that happens for each individual when trying to learn DBT and analytics engineering, which is super rewarding for us, I think. And so another thing that we try to do, we've set up this company. We also create an actual scenario for each student in the class. So we give them this prompt when we start. Imagine that you're a new analytics engineer at our startup Greenery. You've been hired as the first data person to kind of build out the analytics engineering platform. And then each of us, myself, Sourabh, and Jake, we kind of play a role, and we sort of have some fun with each other. So Jake is our chief product officer. Sourabh is our software engineer extraordinaire. And I'm just, some coworker that tries to help out and hangs around in Slack a lot. But what we get to do here, which I think is really interesting, that a lot of times you don't get in a certain setting, what I try to do when we're doing our project sessions, I actually raise questions to Jake, like as a chief product officer, he and I are going to be working together to understand requirements and how things should be modeled, in the context of analytics engineering. And you don't get a lot of that context outside of the technical world. Like DBT and analytics engineering and data in general can be understood in one dimension, but there's also sort of the people part and how you interact and gather requirements and feedback, which is probably more difficult to understand, especially, in online courses. And so we really drill into that. And I think it adds a lot of value, just understanding how people might communicate, what the workflows look like, and things like that. So yeah, Jake and I make a lot of jokes about how many requests back and forth the product team might have for the analytics team. But again, it drives a lot of insight into things that you might not see in the context of a traditional online course.
Yeah, and I require no method acting. I can just be myself and ask questions that are vague and uninterpretable. So it's really nice. Awesome. So another thing that we do, and apologies, is there small screens to read, but what we have people do is, you actually push your project to your own repo each week, and we have, for different courses, have different models. But what happens in all of them is you're submitting your work using a link to your project, whether it's a Google Colab notebook or GitHub repo. And what happens is it actually tags other people in the class, and everyone is giving 2 reviews each week. And one thing that we found works really nice is that we actually let people say, like, where am I stuck? Like, or do I have certain concepts I'm still struggling with? And then your reviewers can kind of spotlight on those areas. And what we've seen this, like, it certainly adds, additional work to everyone, but we've seen it really, people appreciate it. And this is obviously mirroring a workflow that most of you would be familiar with in your day jobs. So we've seen a lot of people saying, like, hey, like, this is actually my favorite part of the course. Like, I'm actually seeing what people have done differently with the same sort of task, and learn so much from viewing people's projects. Or a lot of people, sometimes we see, like, oh my God, I'm totally going to steal that for my work, or I'm going to steal that for my job. And that's sort of really some of the highlights of the experience. And again, mirroring what most of you would do in the real world with code reviews. Cool. Another fun thing is really just leaning into peer learning. Like, we have, a certain number of people that are on the course team and helping out, but the majority of the learning really is happening from each other. So, in reality, what it really means is we have 50 to 100 professionals in every course. They work at cool companies. They have interesting experiences, and they're here to learn from each other. And what we've found, which has been interesting for this class in particular, is that there's a sort of couple different clusters of people. There's, business analysts, data analysts, BI folks who are kind of learning DBT for the first time, maybe trying to learn some of the engineering best practices and how to apply the data. And then on the other side, there's maybe more technical folks or more engineers moving into data roles. And there's also, people from a host of different interesting roles outside of those groupings. We have product managers, we have customer support. So the idea that people are able to kind of learn from each other is kind of like, I think, really when the magic starts happening in an online learning experience. And most interactions, you wouldn't be surprised, start with, like, I'm kind of stuck. Here's my project. This is where, like, it's 10 p.m. at night, and I'm like throwing up my hands, and can someone help me out? And we always say you have about 100 lifelines in the course. So when you post a question, this is not atypical that we have. I think I see Jake's picture in there, and Emily's picture in there, but we also have 30 other replies from other students in the course able to help you out. And I think that's one of the things, again, that kind of mirrors the real world, but we sort of have no dumb questions policy, and that's like a real principle of how these courses work. Cool.
Yeah, and something else that's super powerful is just having, practitioners in the space of what you're teaching. So obviously Emily leads data at Drizzly. And I think I was at GoPuff when we first started this course, but now I'm at Sigma. And it actually worked out very well. If you think about the 2 ways to deploy DBT, there's, DBT Core and DBT Cloud. Emily and I are both on different sides of the fence there. And so what we get to do is when we talk about analytics engineering, we can give both perspectives of those two platforms, which is really powerful. And again, the fact that she and I have been doing this for several years now, the additional context outside of just like what dbt can do, but more about working with the entire stack, what a cloud data warehouse is, the different connectors that people use to sync data. Like these are all other things that aren't neatly defined in what a course for analytics engineering might be, but we always extend out and cover those things. And again, I just think that additional context is so powerful. If you just kind of learn a bunch of commands and then run a few queries, you're like, okay, I figured out this thing, but what do I actually do with it? And so the experience that Emily and I are able to share, I think adds a ton of value, and people start to understand like, okay, I see analytics engineering, I understand what DBT is, and now I see how it fits into the confines of data, at scale, which again, really resonates with folks and is really powerful. We'll jump to the next. Cool. The other thing that we do, we bring in the brightest and best in the data space. So every week we do these fireside chats. I won't list everyone because I could maybe list everyone, but you can see it on the screen. We do these fireside chats. I think they're for an hour each week. And really it's, data practitioners, as I mentioned, talking about the work that they've done. Again, which is super powerful. So we had a lecture on packages and macros, again, how they can be actually applied in the real world. There's always this, well, here's this macro and this is what it does, but how are people actually using it to be more successful? And then I know Miles gives a really great lecture on data modeling, where we actually engage the students in the course to think about what an ERD could look like. And again, it's just all about trying to bring this back to real world business context. Without it, I don't think people can be as successful until you see how things are being applied in the real world and how people are doing it in their day-to-day job. It doesn't really resonate. And I think we hit the mark with that by doing these fireside chats. And one more, I think what is really awesome, we actually had Ben Wilson from Mammoth Analytics share sort of his journey and what he learned from the course and how he tried to articulate the value of DBT. So we gave this really amazing presentation, and he actually used this course as sort of a launch pad to actually become an analytics engineer. So he's at Mammoth right now doing awesome things. And, the learnings that he had from this course and the confidence he got, he was able to share his presentation with us, and we had feedback. And then it obviously turned into something really exciting for him.
All right, Sourabh, over to you.
And often I think like one of the challenges is like you want people to be successful, but you also want a bit of a struggle. Like the big unlock is when you figure it out on your own. So it's like sometimes we keep seeing this pattern of like, I was stuck for a while, but at the end, it was super fun when I figured it out. And that I think is like where learning is. Learning is in like a little bit of a struggle. And then, so that's been like super fun to see. And then, Jake, if you go to the next slide. Yeah. And then last, I think like one of the big unlocks has been like, people don't like, we don't want students to spend all their time like setting up their dev environment. So how do you make that as smooth and as easy as possible is like has been a big lesson. So like one of the goals in the class has been like, can every student be up and running and like trying to do the thing that they are trying to learn in like first 5 minutes? Because like if you're struggling with like how your Python environment works, it's like you're like basically moving away from like the goal you have. And then we try to like maintain this like cloud-based environment to just do that, which has been like super interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen 15 tweets about people just giving up on something because they're in dependency hell with Python. And so if we can eliminate that, obviously there might be some things to figure out when you actually deploy this at scale at work. But just getting you right into the actual material that we're trying to teach and no blockers or headaches, I think clears up, makes people feel more comfortable to get actually into the material, which is really awesome.
Awesome. I guess maybe the last magical ingredient that we sprinkle on top is a kind of kind community full of support. So 4 weeks is not a lot of time, like if people have run communities to sort of like create norms and get everyone on the same page. But we do feel like connections are made pretty quickly, and the philosophy of no dumb questions enables that comfort. And so we have people supporting each other, like pushing through big weeks. Obviously, we've been running, this is our first year running all these courses. COVID and work from home and families and everything gets in the way, but seeing people encouraging each other to finish their work and finish their courses despite all these challenges. And we celebrate when people get new jobs and people come afterwards with help and advice and questions that are related to their work far beyond the course. So this is kind of like, I'd say, the last magical ingredient that we try to sprinkle in. Hopefully if you are designing a learning experience or have interests, we'd love to talk. But wanted to add just a tiny bit as well about what it would mean to be a learner yourself in the seat, trying to learn a new skill and some of the things that we've learned. And mostly what I'm going to play here is stuff that we've learned from our amazing fireside chat guests. So Taylor Murphy, who runs product and data at Meltano. So I guess somewhere in between, he's a super hybrid of both Jakes and Sourabh all in one. But he talks about sort of writing about the work. And he said something which is like, it doesn't matter if you've written the 100th guide of like setting up DBT for the first time. What it does is a couple of things. It helps you organize your thoughts. So clear writing indicates clear thinking, but it's a way to show your work to potential employers. And also just, it really is this starting the loop of giving back and helping other people who are just starting out. So that was his message in terms of beginning to learn new skills. Emily imparts many lessons, but, if you're, one of the things that she said is, if you're, and she's seen this at Drizzly a lot, if you're part of an organization that uses DBT, maybe you're not an analyst or engineer yourself, but maybe there's an area of the business that super well. But it's slow, it's not optimized, it has errors. It's an area of business where you can start to refactor and remodel and see what you learn from that process. So that's kind of another bit of advice. Winnie, you gave an amazing talk. Winnie from DBT talked about, what are the jobs that are interesting to start out? So a lot of times the advice I think we've heard in a couple camps is one is like move into like an adjacent role and start working a little bit on sort of the skill you're trying to learn. But particularly for DBT, like thinking about like a consulting company or somewhere where you can actually get exposure to a bunch of different problems. And obviously that's not for everyone, but it's a good way to sort of fast forward. And then Emily Chariot, who has given several good talks, is just, the advice we probably hear the most is, find a problem and start very, very small at your organization and thinking about, is there a way to learn a new skill that actually is a burning problem at your organization, and sort of, thread the needle between something you want to learn and something that's actually quite important. And Jake, I don't know if you want to elaborate on this, but this piece where it's really around finding a community. Like there's nothing better than a group of people who are trying to learn something at the same time or teach something at the same time. I think one of the things that we found with our course teams is they just kind of grow each iteration. We get more and more people who want to sort of teach and learn from each other. So that's one of the things that is sort of some advice we would give if you're trying to learn a new skill. Jake, I don't know if you want to add. No, give me a thumbs up. Cool. So we'll leave it to Q&A, but just tiny, short little word on CoRise. We have about 20 courses. If you're interested in teaching, this is Sourabh's email. We'll share it. And just one plug from the community. We have a data engineering course with Dexter starting in 2 weeks. That should be amazing. One of Emily's favorite former colleagues, Dennis Hume. So that's a great course. And last thing before we turn over to Q&A, we have a giveaway. We have 10 fully sponsored seats from Parker and friends at Census. So we're excited to give those away. And Parker, you can give a little more details at the end, but just to show that this is doable, even if you're putting on a conference with thousands of people and busy and have another day job, and you can complete these courses. So shout out to Parker. High five to Parker.
Yep. That was a great course. And we changed the rules of the getaway in a very exciting way. So I'll tell you that after the Q&A. So we have 2 questions. The first one is from Ella W. I'll put that on screen. There we go. How often do you find yourself updating course content? Do you invite your speakers to review and contribute to the content?
Cool. Yes, Sourabh partially answered that, but we'll just elaborate a little bit. Like we're updating content after the run of each class. Some of that is by necessity, like new tools, techniques, new style guides have come out. But a lot of that was we actually review, like at the end, what people actually felt like they learned and where are they still stuck. So if we felt like we explained a concept poorly, or one of the projects was maybe not perfectly ideal, like that sort of improvement loop is something that we build into every course we do.
Yeah, and I would say for DBT specifically, obviously we use this at work, both Emily and I and all the other TAs. And so we're always looking at release notes for the latest things that we're doing at our company. And then we actually extend that out to the course. So we're always updating based on what we're doing too, which is awesome.
And then the second question, also from Ella. In your experience, which content is changing the most? Is it the community? Is it the community DBT packages?
I can take that one. I think it's like a mix where basically like there are obviously new things in like from the content side, like metrics or like how like exposures have changed, etc. But there's also like things we can just teach better. Like how do you debug macros more easily? I think like element data, I think like introduced is trying to work on a new package with Nile on like just debugging macros. Like how do we incorporate some of those practices in the class is like always the goal. Like,
yeah, I think the biggest thing we did in the last course, Jake added a honeypot emoji for anything during the course, like things that we found to be really interesting and things we should think about further. So we would just add a Slack reaction. It would dump it into another channel of like, hey, we should talk about this after the course and figure out how we can improve upon it or include it in the next session, which worked out really well. We have a bunch of new content because of it.
And then you end up with like 40 honeypot emojis per day.
so many good things.
We had one of our first in the second cohort. We had a student from Slack, and she gave me all these Slack tips, so I can over beers impart Slack wisdom at some point to anyone who's bored enough to listen to me.
So I'm adding this poll back on stage for all the folks that are answering. So what we're going to do while people answer this is right now there are about there are 32 attendees, and each one of you is going to randomly pick a number 1 to 32, and whatever number you land on, that person is going to win a course to CoRise, which is going to be awesome. So I'll just name them off. And if you win and you want to give that course to somebody else, perfect. That's totally awesome, and we love that. But we're going to try it out. So we'll start with Sourabh, number 1 through 32. Pick a random number there.
17.
17. That is John Coachran. John Coachran, you just won a course to CoRise. You can pick anyone you want. Contact me in the Operational Analytics Club afterwards, or contact Jake, and Sourabh in the club. All right, next we got Jake Samuelson. You're going to pick a random one.
All right. Number 4, come on down.
1, 2, 3, 4. I hope I'm saying it right. Casey Gopal. Casey Gopal is in marketing, and you also just won a CoRise course. Same thing. If you aren't in the operational club already, where's my hand? There we go. You can join it up top where it says join the club. Reach out to me, Parker Rogers, or one of them, and we will get you all set up. And the last one from Jake number 2, Jake Hannan.
Lucky number 13.
Lucky number 13. 4. Jason Dexter, analytics engineer,
nice.
free agent. Do you guys know him? That sounded like that was someone that you guys knew.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Jason's are really close.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you guys contact me in the Operational Analytics Club, and I'll figure out all the logistics with you. So I need to write this down, actually, so I don't forget. So it was Jason Dexter. Who was the other one? If you want,
John,
did you add
John
that?
Cochran and Casey.
Katie has it in the chat too for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Also,
Perfect.
Katie's on top of it.
Awesome.
there was one
Maybe
other
the
question, but Matthew, I can just take that offline and answer maybe. Like,
Yeah, you can ask all questions if you want to continue talking to Jake, and Saurabh. You do that in the Operational Analytics Lab in the link above. And guys, thank you so much for your time. Next, we will hear from Brett Cobalt in about a minute and a half. So stick around. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.